Imagine sitting down at a restaurant, scanning the menu, and spotting that luxurious lobster roll. It's rich, buttery, and iconic, a dish many Americans splurge on during vacations, date nights, or seaside getaways. But what if that $30 lobster roll suddenly cost $40? Not because the restaurant changed its recipe, but because of global politics and tariffs. According to Seafood Source, the U.S. is considering a 25% tariff on Canadian seafood. That's a move that could shake up a supply chain moving 300 to 350 million pounds of lobster across the border every single year. What happens when one of America's favorite luxury dinners gets caught in the middle of international trade battles? To understand the real impact, we need to trace lobster's incredible journey from the cold Atlantic waters of Canada and Maine all the way to your dinner plate. And along the way we'll see who's really paying the price. Lobsters weren't always the upscale delicacy they are today. In fact, the history of lobster in North America is almost unbelievable. Back in the 1800s, lobsters were so abundant in the cold, rocky waters off the coasts of Maine and Canada that they were considered food for the poor. They washed ashore in such huge numbers after storms that people used them as fertilizer, fish bait, or even fed them to prisoners and servants. They were nicknamed the poor man's protein. Fast forward to today, and lobster has become one of the most sought-after luxury foods in the U.S., sold in high-end restaurants and exported around the world. What changed? It all comes down to supply and demand. As people began to acquire a taste for lobster and natural populations declined, scarcity drove the price higher, transforming lobster from prison food into a fine dining experience. Today, North America exports over 300 million pounds of lobster globally each year, and the process of catching, processing, and shipping this iconic seafood is far more complex than most diners realize. The lobster season peaks in summer and early fall, especially in Maine and Canada's Atlantic provinces, where thousands of fishermen prepare their boats and gear. Each lobster trap is carefully baited with oily fish like menhaden, chosen for their strong smell, which lures lobsters from the ocean floor. These traps are outfitted with biodegradable escape vents so undersized lobsters and other species can slip free, ensuring the sustainability of future lobster stocks. For generations, fishing families have marked their traps with brightly painted buoys and unique color patterns, a kind of maritime fingerprint passed down through the years. When the traps are hauled up, lobsters are measured on the boat to ensure they meet strict regulations. In Maine, any lobster smaller than 3.25 inches across the carapace must be tossed back into the sea, giving them time to breed at least once or twice before being harvested. Female lobsters carrying eggs are always released, and fishermen cut a small notch in their tails to mark them as proven breeders, making it illegal to keep them in the future. The lobsters that do make the cut are banded on their claws to prevent injury during transport, since the top priority is to keep them alive and in peak condition from ocean to plate. Despite the effort, lobster fishing is an expensive and labor-intensive job. A typical 1.5-pound lobster yields only about 4 ounces of edible meat, barely enough to fill a lobster roll. Each trap must be baited, dropped, and hauled up again and again, with many lobsters thrown back because they're too small, too big, or carrying eggs. Add in fuel, boat maintenance, labor costs, and strict fishing rules, and you begin to understand why lobster is no longer cheap. The logistics of distribution only add to the challenge. Once lobsters are selected on the boat, the race begins to keep them alive and valuable. They're packed in insulated crates with ice and salt water, kept cool and oxygenated for the trip to processing facilities. Even the smallest delay, a shipment left on a hot dock, a dip in oxygen levels, can spoil an entire truckload, costing thousands of dollars. At the processing plant, usually within 24 hours of being harvested, trucks line up to unload their live cargo. Automated systems move crates into massive indoor holding tanks, each capable of storing up to 100,000 pounds of lobster. The tanks are chilled to around 40 degrees Fahrenheit to slow the lobster's metabolism and keep them calm. From there, the line begins. Lobsters pass through a stunning machine that delivers a quick electric charge, ensuring a humane end before processing. It's an essential step in modern seafood facilities, balancing animal welfare with industrial efficiency. Once stunned, the lobsters move to the breakdown line. Each lobster is mechanically separated with incredible precision. The tails and claws are routed in different directions, weighed and sorted by size using advanced optical sensors. Tails are flash frozen in liquid nitrogen tunnels, where they're frozen in seconds at ultra-low temperatures. This prevents the formation of ice crystals and locks in flavor and texture. A thin glaze of ice coats the tails to protect them from freezer burn during long-term storage and shipping. Meanwhile, claws, knuckles, and legs are cooked in massive steamers, then chilled in tanks kept at 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Factories also use high-pressure processing chambers that apply up to 45,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. This not only kills bacteria but also separates meat cleanly from shells without cracking. It's an efficient, modern way of producing raw lobster meat ready for restaurants, grocery stores, and meal kits. Nothing goes to waste. The legs and body meat are minced using rollers and sieves, ensuring every last bit of usable meat is recovered. Skilled workers still hand-pick delicate claw and knuckle meat, ensuring premium quality for high-value packs. At peak production, a single facility can process more than 10,000 pounds of lobster meat a day. Before any lobster leaves the factory, it undergoes strict inspections, portioning, and vacuum packing. Products are frozen, sterilized, and stored until distribution. Every detail is designed to deliver the freshest possible product to restaurants and supermarkets across the U.S. But here's where tariffs come in. If the U.S. imposes a 25% tariff on Canadian lobster, the cost doesn't disappear. Someone has to absorb it. Factories may cut margins or slow production. Restaurants may adjust portion sizes or increase menu prices. But ultimately, the consumer often shoulders the burden. That lobster roll you once enjoyed for $30 could jump to $40, not because lobsters suddenly became harder to catch, but because of international trade policies. Would you be willing to pay more for your favorite seafood dish? Or would you switch to alternatives like shrimp or crab? Lobster is just one piece of the broader seafood puzzle. While tariffs and trade battles unfold in the Atlantic, another equally fascinating story is happening in the Pacific Northwest. In Alaska, wild salmon season is a race against nature, technology, and time. Every summer, millions of salmon leave the Pacific Ocean and swim upstream to Alaska's cold rivers to spawn, continuing a cycle that indigenous communities have relied on for thousands of years. By the 19th century, salmon had become big business, fueling canneries and exports. But decades of unregulated overfishing nearly destroyed the resource. When Alaska became a U.S. state in 1959, its constitution included a clear mandate: the fishing industry must be managed sustainably. That decision turned Alaskan salmon into one of the world's best examples of responsible fishery management. During peak salmon season, fishing boats work around the clock, using purse-seine nets to encircle massive schools of fish. Timing is everything. Cast the nets too late, and the salmon begin to darken in color as they prepare to spawn, losing commercial value. Cast too early and fishermen risk missing the largest runs. Crews often work 18-hour days, hauling in thousands of pounds of fish per trip. Quality control starts immediately on deck, where fish are rinsed in cold seawater and chilled in ice or refrigerated seawater tanks. Every minute counts, because salmon quality declines rapidly once it leaves the ocean. At coastal processing plants, which operate 24/7 during the short fishing season, salmon are sorted by size, weight, and freshness. Top-grade fish with bright skin and firm flesh are labeled Grade A, destined for high-end restaurants and export markets. Others are prepared for canning, freezing, or filleting for grocery stores. Just like lobster, salmon must be processed quickly and efficiently to meet demand, highlighting the delicate balance between nature's cycles, industrial processing, and global seafood supply chains. Whether it's lobster from Canada and Maine or wild salmon from Alaska, seafood doesn't arrive on your plate by chance. It takes generations of tradition, rigorous sustainability rules, modern technology, and sometimes even political negotiations to make it happen. And as tariffs, climate change, and shifting consumer demand reshape the industry, one thing remains clear. Every bite of seafood tells a story much bigger than what you see on your plate. Imagine sitting down to a dinner table and knowing that the piece of salmon on your plate was swimming freely in icy waters just a day or two ago, or that the Wagyu steak sizzling on your cast iron skillet comes from cattle so carefully raised that each bite melts like butter. Behind every luxurious meal lies an extraordinary journey of technology, tradition, and human dedication that transforms raw ingredients into world-class delicacies. Today we're going behind the scenes to explore how Alaskan salmon and Japanese Wagyu beef, two of the most iconic foods in the world, make their way from pristine environments to your fork. What you'll discover is a fascinating combination of cutting-edge machinery, centuries-old traditions, and an unwavering commitment to quality. When it comes to Alaskan salmon, efficiency meets nature in a process designed to preserve both flavor and freshness. Machines handle most of the heavy lifting, but the human eye still plays a critical role. Even in an era of automation, skilled inspectors carefully examine each fish to catch defects or irregularities that machines might miss. Salmon that don't meet the strictest standards aren't wasted. They're redirected into other valuable products like frozen fillets, canned salmon, or minced portions destined for industrial kitchens. Nothing goes to waste because in the world of seafood, every part of the fish has a purpose. One of the most important steps in salmon processing comes immediately after harvesting: deep chilling. Once hauled from the frigid waters, the fish are placed into cold storage set just above freezing, close to 0 degrees Celsius, locking in freshness. This step isn't just about preservation. It's about capturing that ocean-fresh taste at the exact moment the salmon leaves the sea. Within just hours of being caught, the fish are already chilled, sorted, and lined up for the next stage of processing. The speed is impressive, and it's this rapid handling that gives Alaskan salmon its reputation for clean, vibrant flavor. Grade A salmon, the highest standard, enters automated filleting lines where cutting-edge technology shines. These machines use advanced sensors to scan each fish, calculating size, shape, and ideal cut placement. Precision blades then adjust in real time, slicing through flesh with millimeter accuracy while minimizing waste. The process is so fast that one fish can be filleted in under 2 seconds, quicker than it takes to slice a lemon. The efficiency doesn't just save time, it ensures uniformity across thousands of fillets that will soon travel across the globe. But machines aren't the final step. After filleting, the meat undergoes another round of careful inspection. Workers examine each piece, removing stray bones or trimming excess fat to ensure that only flawless fillets reach the market. Depending on the destination, salmon may be prepared in several ways. Some are packaged whole, while others are portioned into convenient cuts or sealed in vacuum-packed trays for extended freshness. 4 frozen products. Flash freezing at -40 degrees Celsius locks in natural color and texture, allowing the salmon to retain its just-caught quality even after months of storage. For the fresh market, speed is essential. Salmon packed in ice is often shipped by air, arriving in U.S. supermarkets or restaurants within 48 hours of harvest. What makes this process truly modern is transparency. Today's consumers want to know not just what they're eating but where it came from. Each shipment of Alaskan salmon is fully traceable, meaning buyers can identify when, where, and how the fish was caught. For Americans who value sustainability and food safety, this traceability builds trust and reinforces Alaska's reputation for responsible fishing. Global demand for salmon continues to rise, yet Alaska maintains strict quotas and seasonal restrictions that protect natural populations. For local communities, preserving salmon isn't just about business, it's about heritage and pride in protecting natural resources for future generations. From pristine oceans to high-end restaurants, Alaskan salmon sets the standard for seafood. But when the conversation shifts to luxury red meat, one name dominates the culinary world: Japanese Wagyu. If salmon represents efficiency and freshness, Wagyu represents patience, tradition, and unmatched indulgence. Wagyu cattle are more than livestock, they are treated almost like works of art. Their story begins over 1,000 years ago when native Japanese breeds were first domesticated for agricultural work. By the 17th century, Japan began selectively breeding cattle not for size, but for endurance and the ability to store intramuscular fat, which laid the foundation for the marbling Wagyu is famous for today. During modernization in the late 19th century, there were experiments with crossbreeding Wagyu and European cattle, but these quickly ended as Japan recognized the value of preserving the purity of its native breeds. By the mid-20th century, Wagyu had become a protected national treasure. So what makes Wagyu beef so extraordinary and so expensive? It starts with genetics. The word Wagyu literally means Japanese cow, but only a few purebred lines qualify to produce the beef that now sells for hundreds of dollars per pound. 4 main breeds are recognized: Japanese black, Japanese brown, Japanese shorthorn, and Japanese polled. Among these, Japanese black dominates the commercial market, making up about 90% of Wagyu production and famous for its intense marbling. Unlike ordinary beef, Wagyu fat has a high concentration of monounsaturated fatty acids and a lower melting point. This is what gives it the luxurious mouthfeel, aroma, and buttery softness that chefs and food lovers around the world obsess over. Every Wagyu cow is tracked with meticulous detail, each pedigree recorded to prevent crossbreeding with non-purebred lines. Breeding is strictly controlled, with only cattle that meet exact genetic and health standards allowed into programs. Even the export of Wagyu embryos and semen is heavily restricted by the Japanese government to protect the purity and value of the breed. This protectionism ensures that when you see authentic Japanese Wagyu on a menu in the US, you're experiencing something that is not just rare, but deeply tied to Japan's cultural identity. The fattening phase is where Wagyu's unique qualities are truly developed. Starting around 10 months old, cattle are fed on a carefully controlled diet for 600 to 700 days, 2 to 3 times longer than conventional beef cattle. Their rations are designed not for rapid growth, but for building delicate webs of intramuscular fat. A typical Wagyu diet includes corn, barley, rice bran, soybeans, and nutrient-rich grasses, often fermented for easier digestion. No growth hormones are used and antibiotics are minimized, particularly in the later stages, to keep the beef as natural as possible. Every cow's feed intake is monitored daily, sometimes with the aid of software systems that track progress as if each animal were an Olympic athlete in training. The environment is just as important as the diet. Wagyu cattle are raised in conditions designed to minimize stress. Many live in spacious barns with clean bedding, controlled temperatures, and in some cases calming background music. While stories of farmers massaging cows or feeding them beer are often exaggerated, the underlying truth is that every detail of their environment is optimized to promote health and relaxation. Stress can negatively affect muscle quality, so farms go to extraordinary lengths to create the perfect living conditions. By the time Wagyu cattle reach slaughter weight, often over 700 kilograms, they are ready for grading, the step that determines their ultimate market value. In Japan, this grading is performed by the Japan Meat Grading Association (JMGA), using strict standards that measure both yield and quality. Yield is rated from A to C, while quality is rated from 1 to 5, with A5 representing the absolute pinnacle. To earn this top grade, the beef must display ideal color, moisture, texture, and most importantly, that signature spiderweb marbling. Specialists examine each carcass under white light and use standardized rulers to evaluate fat distribution. This process may sound clinical, but it is what ensures consistency in a product revered around the world. Once graded, Wagyu is butchered into prized cuts such as ribeye, tenderloin, and strip loin. Each cut is vacuum sealed, labeled with traceability codes, and often sold in small, luxurious portions. A pound of A5 Wagyu can fetch anywhere from $150 to $300, and when it reaches restaurants in the US, that price climbs even higher. Maintaining this premium quality during transport is critical. Wagyu is stored in humidity and temperature-controlled warehouses, then flown by air cargo in climate-controlled containers. Unlike many other meats, it is rarely shipped by sea, because even the slightest compromise in freshness could ruin its value. From Tokyo to New York or Los Angeles, the journey takes less than 48 hours, ensuring the beef arrives in peak condition. For American consumers, getting authentic Wagyu requires strict USDA oversight. Importers must have special permits, and every shipment is re-inspected upon arrival. Once cleared, the beef is distributed to Michelin-star restaurants, specialty butcher shops, and premium retailers. Throughout this entire supply chain, the cold chain must remain unbroken. A single lapse could mean the difference between a $300 steak and one that ends up unfit for fine dining. But perhaps the most important moment in the Wagyu journey happens in the kitchen. Unlike other steaks that demand bold marinades or heavy seasoning, Wagyu needs almost nothing. Chefs often recommend simply searing thin slices or small cubes on a hot cast iron pan for just a few seconds per side. A pinch of sea salt, maybe a touch of fresh wasabi, and that's it. The natural marbling does the rest, melting into the fibers and releasing flavors so rich that many describe the experience as eating animal butter. The tenderness is unlike any other beef, soft yet still meaty, indulgent yet balanced. It's an experience so fleeting and luxurious that diners willingly pay $200 to $500 for a single portion at high-end restaurants. From the icy waters of Alaska to the quiet barns of rural Japan, these two foods, salmon and Wagyu, represent very different philosophies of food production. Yet they share something in common: an obsession with quality, a respect for tradition, and a reliance on both human skill and modern technology. When you take a bite of salmon sushi in Los Angeles or Wagyu steak in New York, you're tasting more than just food. You're tasting centuries of history, cultural pride, and the hard work of countless people who ensure that what reaches your plate is nothing short of perfection. So the next time you enjoy a perfectly seared Wagyu steak or a fresh Alaskan salmon fillet, remember the journey it took to get there. Behind every bite is a story of dedication, innovation, and respect for nature. And that's what makes these foods not just meals, but experiences worth savoring.